Howdy neighbor, how is your garden growing? Today in my garden, we're gonna be talking about the vegetables, fruits, flowers, and tips to help you make the garden of your dreams right here in the Sunshine State. And as always, I'm gonna be using my handy dandy Wild Floridian garden planner. You can pick it up at this link right here or the link at the end of the video. So let's first talk vegetables. In the month of July, when it comes to vegetables, there's kind of two things happening. One, if you want to be doing direct sowing or transplanting out into your vegetable garden, it's all about hot weather crops. Whether you live in North, Central, or South Florida, you can be considering things like sweet potatoes, roselle, okra, loofah, and Seminole pumpkins. Now, of course, this makes sense because it's July and it is so hot. Now, when it comes to those hot weather crops that we just mentioned, your strategy is going to be a little different depending on where you live. If you live in North Florida, I wouldn't be starting any of these hot weather crops by seed at this point because your number of days left until you start getting cooler weather are quite numbered. Versus if you live in South Florida, whether you're going to start from seed or transplant, you're still good to go. But for my North Floridians and my Central Floridians, one of the things that you really should be considering starting in the month of July is going to be your crops for your fall vegetable garden. Now, I wouldn't be starting these in the beginning of July, but I definitely would be making sure that one, I have all my seeds ready to go, have all my seeds on order, because we know with some of the companies, it can take a couple weeks for them to get to our house. Two, I have my seed trays, my seed starting mix all ready to go so that late July, I can start my first round of seeds in trays. When it comes to North and Central Florida, you should be gearing up to do your warm weather crops. It feels weird to say this, even though it will still be so hot in July. But when it comes to seeds in protected areas, we're getting ready for warm weather crops. So that means things like tomatoes, peppers, and beans can be started in trays in your covered areas at the end of July in preparation for transplanting in August and September. Now, when it comes to buying seeds for those warm weather crops, there's a couple things you may want to consider as you're getting ready to purchase some seeds. One, in the fall, when it comes to tomatoes, you can actually do some of the larger tomatoes. So those who have been sticking with me most of the year know that I kept saying over and over, small varieties, you know, your Everglades tomatoes and your cherry tomatoes and your grape tomatoes and your sweet 100 tomatoes. But when it comes to fall, you can actually pick varieties that are a little bit bigger. Things that are gonna be 4 ounces, 8 ounces, even up to 12 ounces. And the reason is because when those tomatoes are getting ready to set fruit, they're gonna be at the tail end of fall, if not in early winter when they're putting on the fruit, when pest pressure is down. The other thing that they'll have is we'll have much more even watering, especially if you're doing your own irrigation, which means you're less likely to have things like splitting, which can be a challenge, you know, when we go the second time around on warm weather crops. This is also a great time of year if you're thinking about peppers to consider doing varieties that maybe aren't just hot peppers. While in the spring, we're looking for things that have natural defenses like jalapenos. In the fall, similar to with the tomatoes, because our pest pressure drops down so much, you may want to consider things like doing a California Wonder or other varieties of bell type peppers. But I always like to suggest things like Cubanelle because Cubanelle, it's mild in flavor. It can replace things like bell peppers and it often produces a much better harvest than those bell peppers. But if you have some varieties of warm weather crops and the seed types that you're gonna be picking up, go ahead and share in the comments down below so that everyone can know as they're going and purchasing their seeds as we get ready for fall vegetable gardening. Now, when it comes to fall vegetable gardening, there is way more to do beyond seed starting. One is preparing your beds. Whether you have raised garden beds, in-ground beds, or you have container beds, now is the time to start getting everything ready so that when we get into August and September, you're gonna have your beds ready to go to transplant and seed in place some of those cold weather crops. If you're looking for a whole list of like to-dos, I just did a video where I went over tons of things you should be considering to do. So if you're looking for a checklist to go ahead and check off, go ahead and check out this video about your ultimate summer garden plan to help get you ready to have a successful fall vegetable garden. But one of the key things that you'll want to do, no matter whether you have in-ground raised or container beds, is to refresh your soil if you're not starting from scratch. So grab some bag soil, pull the compost out of the compost bin, go make sure that all the weeds are out, and start getting ready so that your beds are ready to go. Another task that you might want to consider doing in especially late July as we get ready for vegetable garden fall reset is relaying down mulch. This goes well beyond even your vegetable beds, even your flower beds, all your landscaping, getting some fresh mulch down to start really knocking back some of the weeds that are coming really strong right now in the summertime would be a great time to do it. Though I highly recommend you avoid doing this most of the day and instead break it up into small pieces that you can do maybe after work. Now, a tip for you, whether you're doing vegetable gardening, flower gardening, or any type of gardening, is consider turning off your sprinklers in the month of July. While we have just gone through drought season and we're starting to get rains, once your area starts to get regular rains, it is important to turn those sprinklers off. We're at the time of year where we're gonna get easily 6 to 9 inches, which would be typical and normal. And that means even though our water table is low, it's super easy for our plants to basically drown. I don't know how many times I go driving through my neighborhood and it is literally raining and people's sprinklers are running. So take the time to go ahead and just turn your sprinklers off for the month of July so that one, we can conserve water, get more in the water table, and two, you don't drown your plants. Now let's talk fruits. Because we're in the month of July, the majority of the state can plant any types of fruit trees, especially your tropical types for Central and South Florida. Whether you want to do bananas, papayas, mulberries, or a variety of other types like pineapples, gingers, passion fruits, sugarcane, tropical spinaches, all of these you can plant and get established really easily right now in the summertime. And a tip to deal with your fruit at this time of the year, if you already have tropical plants established, things like bananas and papayas are starting to explode with growth. So one of the things to consider is, does any of it need to be pruned? Also monitoring for harvest. These tropical plants are putting out a lot of harvest, and at the same time we have some pretty intense storms rolling through. So you're gonna wanna check on your plants every few days, especially if they're producing harvest, because it isn't unusual for you to have a sudden snap of a limb and there goes a bunch of your harvest on the ground. So you wanna be prepared to be able to sweep it up very quickly. One, so you don't attract wildlife to your harvest, and two, that you actually get it before the fruit flies. Now, whether you're gonna be doing vegetable gardening or fruit gardening, any of these things, you really need to consider doing sun protection. At this time of year, we're at UV index 12, if not peaking into 13 down in South Florida and the Keys, which means that within 15 minutes, you are already taking on sun damage, which means you should strongly consider making sure that you wear sunglasses, hats, long sleeves, pants, even when you're doing gardening. I know it'll make you 10 times hotter, and I know you'll be sweating so much. Protecting your skin is really important at this time of year. It does not take a lot of time for you to create a lot of damage, which is why I go back to gardening very early in the day or very late in the day. And for those who have to go to work all throughout the day, that's kind of the perfect time to go outside and not worry about the intensity of the sun. It's still hot, it's still humid, but a little bit less so. Strongly consider going after 5:30, 6 o'clock is kind of more the ideal time to reduce the impact of the environment on you and allow you to garden a little bit longer. Now let's talk flowers. There are a lot of our tropical flowers that are blooming. There's a lot of our native blooms happening. And there's also something that you may want to consider doing to make your life a little bit easier during the summertime. And it's actually right behind me. One of the main gardening landscaping activities that puts people outside the majority of the time is mowing their lawn. And beyond mowing their lawn, there are so many other activities, from fertilizing, which you shouldn't be doing right now, pesticides, herbicides, and so much more. But one of the things you can do to become more environmentally friendly, add flowers to your gardens, attract bees and attract butterflies and attract birds, is add a lawn alternative. And what you can actually see behind me is a frog fruit lawn. Philonodiflora, aka our native frog fruit, is a lawn alternative that uses less water, can create a pretty significant green mat, and is pretty easy to maintain. I've been doing a lot of testing between this patch and another patch in my front yard to see what kind of combinations work best for me. And of course, I'll be sharing those results. But here in the back of the yard, we have frog fruit mixed with water hyssop, and in the front yard, we have sunshine mimosa mixed with frog fruit. And if you want to learn more about lawn alternatives that are native to Florida, go ahead and check out this video right here, which I'll add to our July garden guide playlist. Now let's talk about our big, bold blooms for the month of July, because while my lawn alternative has tons of tiny blooms, they're not, you don't really notice them from a distance. But if you were looking for blooms that people would go, wow, what's that? There are some great tropical and semi-tropical plants that you should be considering adding to your garden. If you live in North and Central Florida and South Florida, everyone should consider adding our native firebush. You can grow it like a giant privacy hedge. You can train it down as a lower hedge. You can shape it up as a tree and put it in the middle of your butterfly garden. There are a lot of different ways to use firebush. It attracts birds, bees, butterflies, hummingbirds. You want it, you got it. This plant is amazing and is hands down one of the favorites when it comes to Florida native plants for beginners. So if you want to look for consistent blooms that of course can handle whether we have a drought year or a monsoon year, La Nina or El Nino, consider adding our native firebush to your garden. And if you want to learn more about it, I'll put an entire playlist on firebush in our July garden guide playlist that will be linked at the end. Now, when it comes to a Florida friendly plus native plant that adds a lot of blooms to your garden, consider hibiscus. What's amazing about hibiscus is it goes from everywhere from your edible garden all the way to just your classic flower gardens. Of course, we have our native scarlet hibiscus and our swamp rose mallow. When it comes to our Florida friendly, there's a variety of different types of hibiscuses that can go into your garden, everything from Seminole hibiscus. And when it comes to hibiscuses that are edible, of course, we have things like our roselle, our cranberry hibiscus, and even Turk's cap, which is really yummy. It's kind of like a weird sugary salad. This is the best way I could describe it. Another plant that you will find blooming all across North and Central Florida is going to, of course, be our native southern magnolia. This has giant flowers, and if you get the variety like the sweet bay, you would also attract things like eastern tiger swallowtails. When it comes to Florida friendly type landscaping that blooms and has some pretty significant blooms, it's pretty common at this time of year to see things like crepe myrtles. You'll often see these all along street lines and people's yards. They come from a variety of colors, from white to lavender to magenta pinks. Now, when it comes to South Florida and some of the biggest, boldest tropical blooms, of course, beyond just firebush, you can also add things like our royal ponciana is blooming at this time of year, our yellow ponciana, which is a totally different species. If you're looking for a bold tropical orange, look for orange Geiger trees. There is debate in the community on whether these are native or not. If they are native, they are only native to the Florida Keys. Even if they aren't native, they would be considered a Florida-friendly tropical tree to add to your garden. And beyond our Florida-friendly hibiscuses, if you're looking for a very classic tropical look, consider adding frangipani, also known as plumeria, to your garden. Now let's talk a second about the blooms that are best at attracting our bees, our butterflies to your yard, and are of the native wildflower variety. Here are some of the ones that are going to be the showstoppers that are in bloom in the month of July. First off, our coneflowers like orange coneflower and purple coneflower. One of my favorites, which is a tall bloomer, Joe Pieweed, has been in bloom. It puts out gorgeous pink blooms. Another one that actually seems to prefer this time of year and always looks so sad in wintertime is scorpion tail, which I love this one because it's not really great at big bold blooms, but it is great at bringing in predators, specifically wasps, into your garden. No fear, these are not yellow jackets, but are tinier wasps that love to eat aphids and all the things that eat the green leaves. Having this around your garden is amazing. Also, at this time of year, you'll start to see our goldenrods getting ready to do their big bursting bloom, which will probably happen more in August and September, but strongly consider adding goldenrod because it is a key plant in the migration of our monarch butterflies, which will start going on the move in August and September. Boy vey, it is hot out. And if you're looking for more tips and ideas to keep you on track in your Florida garden, go ahead and grab your Wild Floridian Garden Planner from this link right here. If you're looking to learn more about everything from bananas to papayas to lawn alternatives and more, go ahead and check out our July garden guide playlist right here. Tons of videos to help keep you on track throughout the month. Okay, I'll see you soon. Bye.